My name is Clara Towson, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
I am Francisca George, and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Susan Leemans, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom. Yeah.
My name is Zainab Sammaz, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hey guys, my name is Sasha Vickery, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hi, my name is Lloyd Harris, and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Jan Faria, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Yes.
Take one. Well done.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Paolini, and I'm a friend of the show.
Wow, Jasmine, you got it in one time.
Ready? Play.
Well, hello there, and welcome to WTA Weekly. Sorry for the delay there, especially since the delay has meant that you missed out on an extra couple of seconds of Jack Edward. Jack, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Nick. How are you?
I'm good. It's always interesting when we get to do a show together, and we always seem to do a show around about this time of year, like building up to the French Open.
Yeah, I don't know, coincidental maybe. Maybe I'm just at my keenest during the clay season. I love watching tennis. Maybe it's something to do with that, Nick.
Have you ever played on clay, Jack?
I have, yeah. Yeah, I imagine any tennis player worth their salt has played on clay before, right? I don't know, but then it can be quite hard to find at some parts of the world, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I've never lived anywhere near a clay court, so not had the opportunity.
I realised as I said it, Nick, that maybe some parts of England might be a little bit
behind.
There's a dearth of tennis courts that are clay, unfortunately. You probably have a lot of hard courts, I'd imagine, maybe even concrete in some places. Doesn't
pretty much. Look, let's face it. I think where I live, there's literally two places where the tennis courts are not disintegrating.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's really sad actually. I don't like it. There's loads of courts like that and crazy bounces, and if you fall, you're really going to hurt yourself. And it's a shame. It's a shame.
Yeah, I've definitely played on some interesting courts where you don't quite slide like clay, but it feels like it. But we are already on a tangent.
We're getting well. Just before we get back on track, we're getting a little producer nod. Producer wants to know if Jack has ever done a crazy shot in a match. That's quite a general question.
Define
crazy. And I can also see he's talking about a drop shot that went back over the net at one point. I mean, we've all done that, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point in our lives. I'm trying to think of the craziest shot I've ever done. Not sure. Not sure, actually. I'll give it a think. Maybe I'll come back to it. But.
Yeah, maybe think about it. Like, I can think of some things that have been crazy because they were very much not deliberate, such as when I was about, I would have been 18 years old, and I hit potentially the slowest ace of all time, as it literally dropped over the net as short as you can get over the net and barely bounced. And
yeah,
so
that's not a mystery to me. I'm afraid, like coaching at the level of player I coach at, often you get the double bounce ace. It's quite a common one, actually.
Yeah.
Quite often, yeah. So.
I felt the need to apologise to my opponent after that, especially as he looked somewhat annoyed. So back to the Italian Open, and someone who is definitely not going to be annoyed, in fact, is going to be over the moon, is our friend of the show, as you saw in the promo. Jasmine Paolini is the Italian Open champion, the first woman to win the Rome singles title in 40 years. Probably more impressive. I don't know who Raffaele Reggi had to beat in 85, but it probably wasn't Evert Navratilova. So arguably maybe a tougher field for Paolini to overcome. But yeah, the question here, I guess, Jack, is like, how impressed are you by Paolini's run this tournament to a second 1000 title? And is it time to stop underrating her?
Yeah, well, I think that time came and went quite a while ago, didn't it? I'm not that surprised that she managed it. Obviously, she's won a title in the past, but probably the more Obvious sign of her level was the French Open run, I would say. It's obvious that Paolini can compete for big titles, and we knew how good she was on clay, whenever the serve kind of take. But even then, obviously, she won in Dubai, and the serves were still a bit of a factor. She's just so good from the ground, and she's obviously a level above 95% of the tour from the back of the court. So on courts like Rome, you'd always expect Rome to be pretty in her wheelhouse. She's always, going to be that kind of player that should have a few tough matches, and if she can get through those, then she's got a really, really good chance. Honestly, though, she really, really tested this week. Maybe there was a few moments against Schneider, and apart from that, the rest was straight sets, right?
First set against Payton Stearns, she was behind. She was she was behind in that, and then she had to come from 4-love down in the second. Again, it was Schneider, wasn't it? Yeah, that she came back against 4-love down in the second set and basically hardly lost a game from that point.
On the cusp of going out, but even then, when she kind of found her footing, yes, she was in doubt, and obviously, it's silly of me to say that it was never in doubt. Of course, it was in doubt, but it's kind of like when she got her foot in the door there, she had control of the match, and there was that one little, kind of test, and that's always going to happen to players a lot of the time in these kind of runs, and for the rest to be kind of smooth sailing is just so impressive. The final was a fantastic level, and I'm really impressed, and she really. I mean, she was obviously a dark horse, I think, before the French Open. Now she's probably one of your kind of top 3 contenders, maybe even higher. I'm sure we're going to talk about Swiatek in a bit and her chances, but her chances are pretty good now, I would say, Nick.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that was going to be my question to you was, do we treat Jasmine Paolini as a serious title contender, not an outsider for the French Open? And it sounds like, from what you're saying, it's a yes.
Absolutely. I mean, that's never been a question in the women's game, has it? It's like, players that have won big titles could absolutely win another big title. Where you kind of feel like with the men's, so few people get a sniff at those big titles, and maybe there's more winners in the men's side than there used to be, I guess, at certainly 1,000 level. You never really expect your Casper Roods of the world to make that next leap to the French Open title. And for it's just totally different in the women's game. It's just so much more open. The serves don't get put into it. So if you've got a little bit of a bad day, you can't fall back on something. And for somebody like Paolini, she could totally capitalise on that for some of the bigger players. Absolutely. At the moment, Paolini can beat anybody in the world, bar Sabalenka. Sabalenka is just not a good matchup. I'm not saying that she's not a good enough player to do it. It just seems unlikely given the power disparity a wee bit. To be honest, that could be proven wrong, actually, Nick. I just feel like that's not a good matchup for her.
I agree with you. I think slow clay is the one environment that Paolini can hurt Sabalenka on, because Paolini has the ability to get the extra ball back in, which Sabalenka absolutely hates. And kind of loves it. She's got a bit more time. She's not going to be as rushed as much. I think if she was going to beat Sabalenka anywhere, Rome or Roland Garros would be the place.
I don't know. You kind of look at Sabalenka's losses, and actually, she doesn't really get kind of pushed around that much. It tends to be big hitters like herself that beat her. If you can come up with any next off the top of your head to counter that.
Andreeva, French Open last year.
Yes, sorry. There you go. Good.
Hitters.
That's actually a great example. Fair point. Andreeva's a really good example. She's a bit craftier, maybe, though, I guess. Does that maybe fall into a bit of a better kind of disruptor? Is maybe the other thing I'd say. I still back. So, I mean, there you go. If your house was on it, Nick, who would you back? Sabalenka or Paolini in a match? You would probably still go for Sabalenka. Right?
Depends on the surface.
At the French.
Okay, at the French, I think it would really depend on Sabalenka. If Sabalenka was dropping sets left, right, and centre, Paolini.
Yeah, okay. I see your point. So it's a bit like form going into it. That is a fair enough point. But I still think you've not got any idea of their history in that tournament going into it. Who'd you put your money on?
I mean, look, let's face it. This is why I don't bet anything. But I would give Paolini a really good chance of beating Sabalenka on slow play. In fact, I would, and like we may as well talk about Sabalenka at this point, even though she went out of the quarterfinals. I think Sabalenka is at her most vulnerable in these conditions. Looking at her history, she's never won a Rome title. Roland Garros has been locked down by Iga Swiatek. She's proven herself to be undone by craftier players at Roland Garros like Andreeva, like Mukova the year before. And this is like, we're talking post, Gavin fixing her serve, Sabalenka. I'm not going to go before 2023. That wouldn't be fair. If you look at Rome, her Rome losses, they've been to Sofia Kenin. Okay, she wasn't at her best that match, but again, another more crafty player. You've got Swiatek, Rome last year, and then this year, Zheng Wen, who honestly didn't out-hit Sabalenka, but managed to put the ball in really awkward places for her.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to the point, like, how do you irritate Sabalenka? By getting that extra ball in. That still is... Sabalenka doesn't really have a weakness, but it's the thing that you can irritate her when it's like, oh, I thought the point was done and I've got to keep playing. And I think I'm not saying that means she'll never win a French, because I think she can lock in and win it. I think she's one of the leading contenders. Like, it's pretty close at the top. There's probably like a group of 5 at the top who can win it, and she's very much in there, if not at the front. But I do think that out of anywhere else, Roland Garros is where she is the most vulnerable to some kind of defeat, especially if she has a dip.
I hear you. I still want you to put your money on one or the other.
Oh, Paolini or Sabalenka in a match?
Yeah, at the French.
At the French? Are we going to go in general or 2025 specifically?
No, yeah, this French Open coming. So, like, if they play, like, who do you?
In the 2025 French Open.
Yeah.
Money's on the line.
Yeah. So you lose your house. Like, you got it. You just got to back one or the other, otherwise you lose your house. This is the thing. When push comes to shove,
I'm a gambling man. Paolini.
Okay. No, so that tells a lot. So it's like you've got a lot on the line, and you still think Paolini is the favorite, which actually I think is fair. I'm saying Sabalenka with loads of confidence, but I'm still siding there. I still think Sabalenka at her best is, well, now certainly your favorite for the French Open. There's no way we can call Swiatek the favorite for the French Open now. Surely, no chance.
Maybe we'll come back to that later.
Yeah.
Talking about Paolini, though, I do have a question for you about this result before we kind of maybe go back on Sabalenka again, like for the quarterfinals. Paolini here, so far, would you say this result for her is a bigger deal than her 2 Grand Slam finals for her career?
Yeah, good question. And I think I would say yes. I think yes, because now it feels as though going into the French Open, it's weird because it's still kind of centered around her Grand Slam chances, and I suppose that's your indicator of, are you a great player or are you a good player, right? So it does still depend on how she does at the French Open, I guess, and the grand scheme of things in a way. But it feels to me that this win has put her in a really good position for a very good French Open run, where she was in the final before, and you were like, well, how many games is she going to win off Swiatek? I mean, you were never thinking she was going to win it. And now, for both of us, we're talking about her like she's a real title contender. Do you know what I mean? So it does feel bigger, where that maybe felt like it was like, not fluky, obviously, but it might not happen again. We weren't 100% sure.
What about the Wimbledon final?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I know, obviously it did happen again the next month. But yeah, good point actually.
I mean,
that was a bigger deal, because that obviously cemented her as, this is Paolini. She deserves to be like top 5 in the world. Don't mess with her. Like, she is a really, really good player. That was kind of almost her announcement, and she could have won that. Wimbledon's really just all over the place in recent years, you know. Yeah, I think the Wimbledon final was bigger.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would make this the biggest deal because it's a home crowd in front of the president of Italy against a top 3 will be top 2, top 3, top 4 player in Coco Gauff in the final. Obviously, she won the match. She didn't win the Grand Slams. She's got a trophy at the end of it. And I would say that, yes, playing in making a Grand Slam final is a big deal. You're on the world stage. But I would say winning this thing is almost half a slam, whereas losing a Grand Slam final is no slam. If she wins a Grand Slam title, that will eclipse it. But if this is the kind of peak of her career, I think this is going to be the thing that she looks back on most fondly ahead of those 2 Grand Slam finals. At least if it was in my position, right? If I was in her situation and I was Italian and I won the Rome and lost 2 Grand Slam finals, I would be like, Rome was the high point for me. Or as a British guy, I guess Queens would be our next biggest thing. I would say I won Queen. I'd be talking about how I won Queens rather than I lost a Wimbledon final.
I just wonder if,
depending on how
I don't know if professional tennis players see it that way in general. It's still a big title, but Grand Slams are normally the be on end all for them.
Maybe when she's like 50 and she's got a bit more perspective on things rather than necessarily in the immediate future.
I may be wrong. It's just I'm just basing this off of what the general professional tennis player says. But Paolini, maybe this is a massive deal for her. I don't know. Maybe that's one for Talking Tennis to interview to find out how big a deal it is.
I hope we get to talk to her again. She seems to like us. All right, let's talk about the person who she beat, Coco Gauff, who, that final ended up being a straight set loss. Not a lot of people were predicting that result. Maybe underrating Paolini a little bit, but from your perspective, Jack, how would you kind of sum up Coco Gauff's position at the minute? Because she was looking pretty good, potentially to win this title, and then as soon as Sabalenka goes away, her confidence seems to drop.
Is that a recurring theme?
It's a coincidence. I'm going to say it's correlation, not causation.
Yeah, I'd probably say that as well. I don't think it's like she. I'd like somebody to find that out. I don't think that's the case, but I don't think she's underperformed when the title has. Actually, I think there's maybe been a bit of nerves when she's played an underdog. So I do think she's playing the person in front of her rather than thinking about the people that have gone out of the tournament. There's definitely a tendency to get a little more passive when she feels like she can afford to be a bit more passive. So obviously, Paolini maybe being one of those players, but honestly, Paolini maybe deserves a much more respect. She can boss people from the baseline nowadays. It's hardly like she's that pushy or anything like that. Maybe where you could argue she kind of was before. So I don't know. Gauff's just kind of all over the place a lot of the time. You still kind of get one version of Gauff, another version of Gauff. Pretty tricky to still trust her, I would say. She's still piecing everything together. Let's not forget still how young she is, of course. It's so easy to forget that because of all the insane results she's had and how established she is within the world's top 5, really. So I'm not surprised to see her maybe still trying to piece stuff together, but that's still how it feels. It still doesn't quite feel like she's totally complete. So yeah, that's how I feel.
Historically speaking, players don't tend to become complete until like they get to sort of the 22 to 25 age range, unless you're someone like Jasmine Paolini or Jessica Pegula, where that happens at 28.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Historically, obviously that's the case, I suppose, Nick. But then you've got to look at somebody like Gauff, and she has bucked the trend, and that's why it's fair enough for people to say she should be more complete than she is. Obviously, yeah, fair enough. She was on the tour when she was like 15 years old, so that does make sense. I would still say, honestly, I'm talking about players. I'm falling into my own trap sometimes of talking about players with sweeping statements. There's no point. Gauff is Gauff. It doesn't really matter. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter what anybody else's does, what history says, what we expect of her. Gauff is Gauff, and she's got her own weaknesses that she's still trying to piece together. Doesn't always get it right. That's what makes her the player she is, and that's what makes her a Grand Slam champion as well. There's strengths that absolutely flow, and that's why she won the US Open. I still think for me, she's whether we expect her to be or not, she's still a little unreliable in some departments, and whether that will get patched up, I'm sure it will, but she's still just not quite there yet.
I mean, and that's more my point. It's like, okay, I don't know whether like that extra step of being there will come in the next 1 to 5 years. So
it might not. It might not. You know, some players try so hard to patch up other parts of the game, they forget what works. Again, we'll talk about Iga in a second, but yeah, sometimes you can really kind of lose sight of how do I keep ascending, and actually it can have the opposite effect, and all of a sudden you're overthinking stuff that you used to be really good at, and maybe Gauff has reached her peak level.
But the thing is, Gauff is a confidence player, and I find that when she's on and she's feeling good, everything works, including all of her weaknesses. Yeah. So, and then she beats everybody. We saw that how she won the US Open. That's how she won the WTA finals last year. That's how she kind of got into form over this clay court season. So I'm interested to see what happens at the French, whether she kind of moves on from this little bit of a setback of losing to Paolini. Because, yeah, I think it's worth noting that at Roland Garros, she's only lost to the champion the last 4 years. So there's something about Coco Gauff and Roland Garros where no matter how she's playing, something seems to click. And I think she's going to remain a very, very dangerous player. And, hey, look, she won a really I think her main strength you talk about is her mentality as well as her physicality. And that's what's won her that match against Zheng Qinwen in the semi-finals, which, look, it's up to you. If you're this has to be like an amazing match with like high quality, very few errors, clean hitting. It wasn't that match, but it was dramatic. It was exciting. And it was more about who could lock in and play well at a given moment. And I found that one very entertaining. And it's the exact kind of match that Coco Gauff wins more often than not.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a good sign of her strengths, Nick. I think I remember talking about, and I actually, there's two sides to this, I guess. I remember talking about a Sabalenka match that was with Gauff maybe 4 years ago now, where the two of them double fought so many times. It was a very kind of ugly match, for one of the words. And I came out the other side of it saying the two of them are just like so gritty. You know, that's a good spin on it. It's fair enough because the two of them just fight through even when their weaknesses aren't working. They find ways to win points with, tennis that maybe isn't working on the day. And it ended up being a really dramatic match, as you say, but also quite a good indicator of the two of them just fighting through and really probably not enjoying some parts of their tennis, but finding stuff despite that. Right. So I think I actually completely forgot my other point, Nick. What did I start by saying? I went on a little bit of a tangent there. What was the first thing I said? What was the question, Nick?
The question was about, it was more about, that the Zheng Qinwen match being the kind of match that Gauff is good at winning and being. Yes. So you kind of answered it.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of did exactly. Yeah. So basically, my point was like, she's good at winning that with her not best level. With her or maybe lower level, and that's that is a sign of a champion. Like they find a way to grit through, and even when they're not playing their best, they still beat very good players. With ugly tennis, right? And then when it all does click, they're still winning they're winning matches obviously even more easily. And I think it's quite a good indicator that maybe Gauff doesn't get much better, but she's very good at riding those lows until eventually you get the kind of highs again. And it's a reason that really we shouldn't underrate her for the French, because even if she has a few ugly matches, she's probably going to come through them. You'd probably rate her as the favourite even when she's not playing great against 90% of the tour.
This probably is going to shock you, Jack, but if she'd won that final against Paolini, I was going to put her top of my French Open power ranking.
No, that's not much of a shock. I don't think it's much of a shock. Like, we'll talk about that in a bit, I'm sure. There's other players to talk about, but you've not got many other people that would be in contention above Gauff, and I imagine Gauff is still probably going to be pretty high up in your power rankings. So,
oh yes, 100%.
Yeah,
it's deciding the exact order at the top. That's the problem, because there's 5 people fighting for that top spot, and that's something I've got to go away and think about. But
there's an argument, just before we, very quickly, a little side note, there's an argument to be made that Gauff's worst tennis is the best worst tennis in the top 10. Does that make sense? So when they're playing their worst, Gauff is probably your most reliable player.
I'd agree. I would say it used to be Swiatek, but right now it's Gauff.
100%. So their lowest level, exactly, is definitely, I would say Gauff is your most reliable, which is why she's going to be pretty high up in my power rankings.
Exactly, and that's why she's going to be high. She's going to be high in the rankings in general, in the regular rankings as well, because that base level is so high, and that's why she was so good as a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
On that, I'm going to do a quick segue because I want to try and do the finalists as well, but we'll probably go on to the big players in a minute. But I just want to. This is a nice segue into a couple of others from this player. Sun Jingwen, semi-finals.
Yeah,
after having an amazing season so far, is there hope that something's going to switch on now for the rest of the year? She certainly loves it at the French. She's the last person to go. She's coming and beating the Roland Garros if you count the Olympics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I fancy Zheng's chances for sure. Again, there's a few weaknesses in Zheng's game that when they're not working, it's certainly a different case to Gauff. It's like you can see the wheels sometimes coming off a bit, and still a lot to patch up, particularly the serve sometimes. But obviously the flip side to her game or the upside to her game even is inarguable, right? I mean, she's just hit such a good ball and such a heavy ball. Very good for clay, despite the fact that maybe she might prefer faster conditions for some of her strengths. The forehand is indisputable at the French Open. I'm sure that will do a lot of damage, probably easily get her through her first 3, maybe 4 rounds, and we'll see who she's up against in the quarters. Should be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's going to be like which quarters everyone's going to be in. That's going to be a really fascinating aspect of the women's draw at Roland Garros. And like that result we're seeing on the screen, if you're watching this live or watching it back, that quarterfinal result against Sabalenka, where she finally gets a win in the matchup. And that, to me, going back to our conversation between Sabalenka and Paolini in that matchup, it exemplifies my point around Sabalenka being a bit more vulnerable on clay, because Zheng was struggling in that matchup. This gave her the environment to best take the opportunity presented to her with the game, with her strengths on clay, when Sabalenka, let's face it, didn't play her best. But even Sabalenka, not her best, still beats Zheng every other time they've played, if you look at what happened in previous matches they've had. So, thoughts on, does this road result kind of stall the hype around Sabalenka going into the French a little bit?
Yeah, surely. Maybe well, not for me really. A little bit, definitely. I'm maybe not quite as big on her. It's fair enough. It's the tournament really before, and you can't really ignore it. And then obviously you actually look at her history, like you were saying, Nick, and it does kind of maybe flash a few alarms. But I still can't not back her to get to the semis at the very least. And I probably still fancy her to hit most of the players on tour.
Oh yeah,
tricky. I think you've convinced me a wee bit, Nick, with just the rundown of the players that have beat her on slow clay recently. That's maybe skewed a few things in my head. I didn't realise it was quite as bad as that. The wheels can come off, and they have come off quite often. So that was a stark reminder.
Yeah, and this is possibly the best version of Sabalenka we're going to get. I think we've been seeing that since she came back from that injury that took her out of Wimbledon, where she's been consistently getting to finals, if we ignore that blip in the Middle East earlier this year. And no, let's face it, she's the world number one, because you have to go through her to win a title. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case again at the French. And I think she must feel like she has unfinished business there, given, as I said, like the 2 losses she's had, difficult, tricky losses against players that, well, Mukova's been a thorn on her side, whatever the surface. And Andreeva has now beaten her on hard at Indian Wells. So they're probably players who have the potential of beating her anyway. But she must feel like, given how tight those losses were, particularly the Mukova one, that she has unfinished business at the French.
Yeah, 100%. I have to agree.
Yeah. So yeah, not much else to say about Sabalenka because we've kind of talked about her a little bit at the beginning of the show as well. So like, yeah, I can understand kind of why she's high, but like this is the situation now. We've got these players that's kind of jockeying and jostling for that sort of who's the favourite for Roland Garros, and is there a number one favourite? And we've mentioned two of the others already: Coco Gauff, Jasmine Paolini.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in previous years, it's been Iga Swiatek by miles. And I guess the key thing is a question I posed on Twitter was when we're kind of looking at the situation. And I think it's quite interesting. It seems to be very divided in terms of the replies that I got. Was when we look at Swiatek's Roland Garros prospects, we have to decide which matters more: her history at the tournament or her clay results in 2025. And it's interesting. There is a definite 50-50 split as to which people put more weight on.
I mean, I think the answer is pretty obvious, right? Recent form, like her own results are great. Why wouldn't you also put that into the equation? It's like, she's got a great history in Rome.
Yeah.
And then she's had a terrible result here. It's like relatively a terrible result, obviously. She obviously still played a really good match in her first round. So she'll still beat most of the tour. And for me, she probably still makes it pretty deep. I still think she needs to get beaten by somebody pretty good at Roland Garros. But the conditions aren't that different. And the reason that Iga's so consistent on clay is because her groundies are like insanely good all the time until this year. And it's like now her forehand, which was her just biggest strength, is just not quite as reliable. And that's just not been a factor in previous years. It's a big, big difference. And I don't think that's something that Iga can escape this year. It's just going to plant a lot of seeds of doubt. And actually, in previous years, she's talked about being nervous, but she can rely on her strength. We talk about great players and they're not remembered for all their little weaknesses. It's their biggest strengths. And if that's not there, then she's not going to feel confident. And if she's not confident, it's gonna. I really don't rate Iga, I'm afraid, this French Open. I can't look at her history and say that it's the same thing because it's just not.
Yeah, I can see why. For me, yeah, it's one of those things because, like, if she locks back in and refines her game, refines her confidence, that completely changes. And that's the one thing that's holding her back right now. And unfortunately, that's an unquantifiable thing that you never know when that's going to switch back on for her, because it could because we're all individuals, and when we all have low points in our own lives, there's no consistency in when those things go back on the up. So it's difficult to predict, which is hard because when we're sports fans, or if you're someone who wants to place a bet, you want to see something predictable to rely on.
Yeah. I think,
and she wants that as well because she wants to be able to start performing and delivering results because she's very results driven.
Yeah, I think it's kind of. I still just think that comparing her to previous years is just not. I get it, but it's not the same Iga. It's just not. She's not won a title in so long. Obviously, the last one she won was the French. This is going to be a year. That is not Iga, and we know it's not Iga. It's the way she's been playing. It's just not Iga. So I find it hard to say anything about Iga, talking about her like it's the same person. It feels like a different version, and I get it. There maybe is a world where she sorts it all out before the French and she locks in, and I kind of get the reason we should talk about that, but I don't see it. I'm sorry, I don't see it. She would have done it for Rome. She would have done it for other tournaments. Like, the French might be bigger, but if she could do it, if she could lock in, then she would have. I don't think she's reliable Could happen. As I say, I still think she beats most of the players she plays, but there's going to be a lot of sticky moments, and she maybe comes through those. But somebody who can hit the ball, who's feeling the confidence to hit through her this tournament, this French Open, I think is the favourite. Maybe I'm going to sound stupid, but that's how I feel. That's my gut.
That's fair enough. I'm still going to keep her in the mix of those 5 players who could win it. And it's pretty close between them. You were mentioning before something about players forgetting their strengths to try and fix other parts of their game. Do you think that's what's going on with Iga?
Yeah. So I feel like, I'm sure she's working on it behind the scenes, but that feels like that's what's dropped off. The forehand was always super reliable most of the time. Do you know what I mean? But relatively, it's definitely taken a big dip. It used to be something she could just use to win matches almost single-handedly. Obviously, the backhand is just as special. But it feels like that's the bigger strength, and it's just not there at the moment as reliably as it has been. So I don't know. Obviously, there's other stuff going on with changes in the team, and maybe that's what instigated all this kind of doubt, and that's why she's feeling underconfident and why the forehand is maybe regressed a bit. So it's maybe not stuff that she's working on necessarily. It could be personal stuff. It all seems to be that with Iga. She kind of talks about life a lot of the time when she's talking about her form and how she's feeling, and she's that kind of player. I think she does. She plays, with her heart. Do you know what I mean? Like she kind of plays how she's feeling a lot of the time. So
do you think there's players out there who can have that, who do have that separation then?
What do you mean?
What's going on outside tennis affect how they're playing?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't really know for sure. Obviously, I don't know for sure how. Do you know the reason I'm saying that, Nick? Actually, is because Iga talks about it a lot, and other players don't. So it's quite hard to know. Do you know what I mean?
That's
for
fair.
Other players, it's difficult to know because they don't talk about what's going on outside of tennis. But Iga kind of hints at it a lot of the time, and she hints about how she's feeling, and it's a bit easier to read, to correlate the two for Iga, where it's maybe a bit more difficult because other players play with a bit more of a poker face. Iga kind of wears her heart on her sleeve a wee bit, right?
Yeah, that makes sense, and which is interesting because for a long time she didn't have that reputation, but she is more open than people think. Let's see how it goes. We are right that sort of she's not. I think if you were to back Iga to win Roland Garros this year, you have to be really confident that this is the tournament where her confidence comes back. That seems to be and that is something you can't predict. So let's see what happens. Hopefully she feels comfortable playing tennis again, because I want to see that forehand firing again, because when it's going, it is, in my opinion, the most spectacular sight in women's tennis. Iga's forehand on clay, smashing those huge topspin winners.
Yeah, it is. I agree. I would still put her top 5, by the way, for the record. I agree.
Yeah.
She's still up there. Like I said, I still think she makes the quarters, beats players that she should be beating, and then top 10, the players that we would consider the highest ranked. I do think it's going to be about 50-50, if not a little bit. Like, for example, Gauff. I could see Gauff beating her.
Yeah.
Almost tempted to
she beat Madrid.
Yeah. So, that's how I feel. Maybe it is a bit Iga slander, but is what it is.
I don't think it's slander because it's an unknown at the moment. But it's unknown at the moment. We'll see what happens with it. We talked about this top 5. I think you and I probably have the same 5th player because we've already mentioned Paolini, Gauff, Sabalenka, and Swiatek. I'm assuming you and I have the same 5th player in mind.
Well, so Swiatek might be my 5th, I think.
Yeah, but we've mentioned 4 out of the 5 potentials.
Oh, we mentioned 4 out of the 5. Right. Okay. I don't know. No, I don't know. Who's your 5th?
Mira Andreeva.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. Of course.
2 losses to Coco Gauff this clay court season, including at Rome. Gauff seems to be a bit of a bogey person for her, but there's no doubt that Andreeva's made a step forward, and I would argue, she could have taken that match to a third set against Gauff. Maybe she wouldn't have won it, but that would have been a step forward. I think, yes, age and experience may count against her at the latter stages, and that's why you can't necessarily go fully behind her to win it. Same thing with that Gauff matchup, or it's out there. Maybe another player peaking would probably be too much trouble for her. Her results have been sort of quarterfinals, first, second round, etc. Stuttgart. So you can't really. It's hard to argue that she'd be the top favourite, but she has to be in the conversation as a title contender, especially given I think she played pretty well in that quarterfinal against Gauff. Made it a good contest.
Yeah, it was a great level. Kind of hard to argue against you, actually. I guess I kind of still had Zhang in my head a wee bit. But honestly, that's kind of recency bias, actually. Andreeva's results have probably been better across the board. And she's kind of announced herself as... I think Zhang has as well, to be fair. So maybe it's a little bit of a toss-up. But certainly a big title contender, I was going to say. I think on the surface, though, I think I'll go for Andreeva as well. Just because slow clay, she's probably going to piss a lot of people off.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So,
and she's done that. She did that last year at the French. She did it the year before. I think if she hadn't got so nervous against Paolini in that semi-final last year, obviously first time being at that stage in her career, that match would have been a lot closer, and I would have been very interested to see. I don't know whether she would have had a chance against Swiatek in that version of Swiatek in the final last year, but that could have been a glimpse into the future a little bit. But shoulda, woulda, coulda. Paolini was also playing really, really well, and may well have got that match. So, I think Andreeva on slow clay is a nightmare for most players to play, unless you're Coco Gauff or Parsi Swiatek. Well, okay. Now, I did make a promise, not on the channel, but in the WhatsApp thread. I don't know if anyone mentioned it because I've ever been on a stream, but long-time viewer of Talking Tennis, Ghost of Gerolitis, possibly one of our best, our first sort of members, long-time stars, has been talking about Payton Stearns and mentioning her as much as he possibly can. And I pretty much ignored all of his requests to talk about her in last episode of WTA Weekly when we were wrapping up Madrid, because in my mind, Payton Stearns didn't get far enough to be worth mentioning. And then I looked at her record during Rome and I was like, hang on, that was her third last 16 of the year. And then she goes and wins 3 consecutive deciding set tie breaks, was up against Paris in the first set, could have won it in the semi-final, may have just ran out of gas a bit. But this was Payton Stearns' breakthrough run officially, and it was on clay, which in retrospect probably again shouldn't have been a surprise, given she's actually all right on that surface. She's had some decent results on it before. But yeah, Payton Stearns, college graduate, great fighter, great to watch her play when she's on. Thoughts on her breakthrough and her prospects, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, she's got a great amount of power to her game, obviously. We've seen her hit very good players. It's maybe still kind of early days, and it will be interesting to see if she's one of those players who's gonna have the odd big run like this, or if she's I still don't think she is a consistent, kind of top 10 contender. So it's easy enough to watch Payton Stearns and say, top 10 potential. But will she actually be top 10? It's kind of difficult to tell at this point. You've got a lot of players who kind of have the same kind of power as Payton. One that comes to mind is Stremska, for example. Big, massive game, capable of beating loads of players on her day. Is the consistency there? Not really. I don't know. Payton Stearns still feels like that for me. But
still pretty raw.
I think maybe Stremska is a little bit of an unfair comparison because she's Yastremska is definitely a little bit less consistent than Payton, and that's maybe fairly obvious. But I still think, it's quite raw, and it's maybe will be interesting to see if this is the kind of level she can bring week in, week out. If she can kind of mould her game into that or not, I'm not really sure yet. So I'm not sure. I don't know, Nick. I don't want to make any brash claims and get too excited on the Payton Stearns screen.
People have done that to too many tennis players. I would agree with you. I think that for me, Payton Stearns is, let's just say what she's definitely going to be. She's proved herself to be. I think she's a big match player. If she's got to a semifinals or 1,000 before, she can get to similar kind of results at big tournaments again.
Mm-hmm.
I think she is a player to watch in tournaments. She's going to be a nightmare for any leading player to have in their draw to deal with going forward. And I would say that she's one of those players that, like, if you buy a ground pass for a tournament, like a slam or a 1,000 or whatever, or you have tickets for a tournament, you go watch her match, because you'll definitely have a good time, whether she's winning easily or she's scrapping with someone else. And for me, I think Payton Stearns, regardless of maybe what her peak results will be, will always be a box office player.
Yeah, that's a great summary.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, Jack.
Sometimes, just a little asterisk there. Sometimes you don't even have to mention the, Grand Slam winning potential. She's just good to watch, isn't she? Like, that's it.
And there's a few players out there that, like, they might not win a Grand Slam or another Grand Slam, but they're still good to watch. I would put Bianca Andreescu in that category.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Ons Jabeur comes to mind. I'd love to see her live. Totally.
Karolina Muchova.
Yeah, Karolina Muchova. Fascinating player to watch. Ostapenko for a laugh.
Oh, yeah. I think I've seen her play. I watched her play at Birmingham a couple of years ago. She's definitely an interesting player to watch. Although she had it pretty together, that tournament. Okay, Jack, are there any stories from Rome that we might have forgotten about?
Not off the top of my head, Nick. No, I think, as always, Rome ends up being a little bit of a, what's the word? Precursor. Primer, the word I'm looking for, doesn't it, for the French Open? And that's normally the chat that's on everybody's heads. Who's really going into the French Open as the favourite. And we covered pretty much everything there.
Brilliant. Okay. Jack, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Obviously, there is WTA action happening this week. We've got a 250 in Bogota, and we've got a stacked 500 in Strasbourg. I've looked at the first round, and it's like insane.
Over the last couple of years, honestly, like these 500s are mad. Like, it's just the same thing. They're pretty much got like every member of the top 10 in them. And they're insane. Who would have thought
that the 500 the week before the Slam would have so many top 20 players in it? It's 20, 30 players. It's incredible. And it's even got Elise Cornet in it. I thought that woman retired. But there you go. So that's a tournament I'll definitely be keeping an eye on. Like Hadad Towson, Collins Kenin, Raducanu Kasatkina, all of them tomorrow. Yes, please. Sadly, Krejcikova's out already, but that was always going to be a tough one for her to come back to. Well, I guess my comment on that is Hamburg, eat your heart out. Of an ATP jibe there. Obviously, we'll see if some of those players play, like Badosa. We don't know whether he's going to play or the others, but I'm interested to see how this tournament kind of works out, this event. And I definitely think it's worth watching in the build-up to Roland Garros, which we are in the build-up of now. And there will be a full draw reaction show at 2 p.m. CET on Thursday when that comes out. We'll have a group of people going over that and giving initial thoughts on what happens. I think it's going to be one of the most fascinating draws to watch for a while, it has to be said. And then we'll have a WTA Weekly to break all down the potential stories coming out of that draw once that happens. So, Jack, thanks for coming on.
It's all right.
Thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you on the next episode of WTA Weekly. In the meantime, take care and keep talking tennis.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.